So this is exciting discussion, and not a necessary discussion until the end. The topic is cloud security. Okay, so while I'm presenting, my name is Dr. Pak, or I'm presenting. If you have any questions, you're allowed to type your questions or chat in the chat line. There are actually two of them. And in the questions box, and there's chat line. So I think if you can select the chat box and type in your questions, I think I will monitor, and then I will probably answer your questions at maybe the end of the seminar, okay? Or I can actually interrupt while I'm presenting and then answer your questions, okay? So it looks like we have a number of attendees growing at this time, okay? So there is a hand raising. Let's see who's raising hands. Okay, so at this time I'm going to present. Let's see if this is being recorded. Okay, all right, so I think this is being recorded. All right, sounds good. Okay, so welcome to the webinar. So this is cloud security. So what I'm going to cover today is one of those challenging security issues in topics is cloud security. So when we talk about cloud security, what is a cloud security? So anything related to cloud computing that we have some issues with the security is considered as a cloud security. So we're talking about some of the very basic cloud security issues and some of the concerns about the cloud issues that are still out there. Okay, and so we're going to cover some basics, and we're going to cover some more advanced topics as we move along in this webinar. Okay, so first, definition of what is cloud computing. Cloud computing is, we have had physical servers, and the people have access to physical servers in the data centers and on the network. Now that has been migrated into cloud environments. So when we migrate those physical servers into cloud environment, we virtualize them. So we virtualize those hardware servers to save cost. And then once we virtualize them, and then we can naturally migrate into cloud. And when we migrate into cloud, we are actually migrating applications, right? Applications are available in the cloud environment so that the people can access the web-enabled applications, okay? So there are different ways of we can deploy cloud models, right? And I think there's applications as a service. Then there's a platform as a service, and there's infrastructure as a service, right? That's more cloud computing models. Now, and each model has different security implications. And now we're going to talk about just security problems in the cloud environment in general, right? So whether you're using the application, whether you're using a platform as a service, whether you're using infrastructure as a service, we're going to talk about security issues in the cloud environment or in any environment. Okay, so that's the topic today. And I can see attendees number growing over 150 attendees. So welcome everybody. Okay, so that's what cloud security is all about. So but there are some services that we're going to have to worry about in accessing cloud computing. And in terms of security, where are security boundaries? Where are security services running and to protect the cloud computing? So we'll talk about those. And especially when we are hiring somebody else to do both security work, such as if we're hiring Amazon. So I'm not picking on Amazon, by the way. I'm picking anybody. So let's hire somebody, right? So it could be Microsoft or Amazon to do cloud computing. And then you can also hire them to do security work in the cloud environment. So while you are actually hiring them as a cloud provider, you can also ask them to do security work at the same time. So protect my cloud platform, protect my cloud computing environment, so I can run applications, I can run a platform, I can run infrastructure in a cloud environment. So those are something you can actually contract it out, and it will cost you money, and then you sign up for SLA, which is a service level agreement with the contractor. Then you'll monitor those SLAs. And once you monitor those SLAs, you can tailor monthly basis whether they do a good job or not, and then you can tell them I'm going to penalize them based on the SLA, or you pay them money because they did a wonderful job. So it's based on SLA, and also service level agreements based on their performance on a monthly basis. So that's how we will approach those cloud providers, such as Amazon or Microsoft and other vendors out there. So that's kind of the relationship we have when we outsource the cloud computing. At the same time, you can also run your data center inside of your organization, and that means that you'll be managing the data center. At the same time, you can migrate your physical servers, virtualize them. Then you can actually migrate all those applications into cloud environment for your organization. That means that you're becoming the cloud provider for your organization. Many organizations does that, and especially the government agencies, they do a wonderful job. The DISA, as an organization, they provide all cloud services to all DoD agencies, right? And so that's one of the customers I support. And they are actually providing all cloud environment, cloud platform, cloud applications for all DoD, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. So it works really well because they're all defense organizations. So I think organizations do that internally, and also organization does that for outside customers. So it all depends on the contract you sign up to. So given that scenario, so where are security boundaries, security issues that we have to worry about? All right, so we talk about all those. So the dangers and vulnerabilities, attackers. Who are those attackers? Well, attackers could be coming from internally. They may be coming from outsiders. They may also be being hired by third parties. All right, so we talk about all those, and they can create threats. And then some of the concerns, and they can damage our assets. Assets could be virtual machines, it could be hypervisors, it could be any physical hardware. We'll talk about those. And then where are the security boundaries and domains? We just talked about that a little bit. Then what is the best solution? And then recommendations to better have cloud security.
Hi, Chuck. Are you still on slide 2?
Slide. That was actually slide 2. Yeah.
Okay. Now you're on slide 3. Okay. Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I was on a long slide. Okay. All right. So, so for those people attendees, but very new to security, so here's a very a quick summary of security services: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So security is all about protecting these three triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So I'm going to cover just in 30 seconds. Then we move on more advanced topics. Confidentiality is something we want to protect from being accessed unauthorized. Someone trying to access your confidential information, they don't have authority to do so, and they may compromise the confidentiality. So it's all about unauthorized accessibility is breaking the confidentiality. Now, integrity is all about someone unauthorized making unauthorized modifications. So if someone making any changes unauthorized, especially in the database, that will be compromising data integrity. Then availability is obviously if they are shutting down our services. So a service is not available, and so that the people don't have access to our services. That is our availability. So security is all about protecting these triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our assets. Our assets are all those computing resources and our services. Okay, so here's an example of authorized to know is about confidentiality, and the data has not been tampered with, and so we're keeping our integrity. Then make sure that the data are never lost from online, and so make sure the system doesn't fail. Services not shut down on unauthorized. These are all part of availability. So we're talking about all those, how we can protect all those in the cloud computing. All right, so this is where we're at. So we talked about some of the basics of security, and now let's talk about cloud security. So what is a cloud security, which is one of the most important topics in today's environment in cyberspace. So security concerns, but it's all around who has access to in the cloud environment and who's managing that cloud environment. and also about where is the cloud is being hosted at. So here is the boundary, as you can see. If you are actually hiring someone to host your cloud computing, as you can see in the graph here, so we have customers, we have customer data in the cloud computing and the cloud providers. So that can be managed by Amazon. That could be managed by Microsoft. That could be managed by someone else. So that will be a provider a prime. That means the private providers will manage those infrastructure, and they will also manage our customer data and our customer software. Right, and the customer will access those in different facilities, different cloud environment, and wherever they are. They could be in the United States. They could be also in outside the country. Okay, so that's all about where the actual data resides. So this is something you need to really tell your cloud providers. I need to keep our customer data in the United States. If we are concerned about privacy, if you're concerned about security, if you're concerned about other security issues. So that's something you need to really worry about, because once you put in the cloud, customers may not know exactly where data is coming from. Okay. So anyway, so here are some of the challenges in the security in the cloud. So if you are migrating any systems and applications and hardware infrastructure in the cloud, security is one of the most concerns today, right? And there's performance issues, another concern. Then there's availability. Make sure we have system up and running all the time. So these are some of the challenges, but we have. But security is being one of the most important aspects we're worried about. So, but here are some of the main issues we have. Why cloud computing brings a new threat? Because it's in the cloud and it's also in different facility, different location, and sometimes it's managed by different people. So traditional system security practice may still surface, but it may be surfacing from other locations, because we are hosting it on outside of our locations. So here's a good example of cloud security problems are coming from loss of control. When there's an attack in the cloud computing, so we just don't have access to our applications, and we just don't have a control of configurations, because we lost control of configurations and modifications of any management. And then there's a lack of trust. Lack of trust is coming from we are hosting our cloud computing and a cloud provider facility. And so they have the total control of managing it, and they have total control of configuring security at the same time. So which means, if there's any compromise, there's any security issues, how can you trust a cloud providers if you have been compromised? Your application has been compromised, you have lost a data breach, and you have lost a customer credit card on your cloud computing. So which means your cloud providers have not protected data confidentiality, integrity, and availability on your data asset, information asset. So there comes with a lack of trust and also breach of the contract, right? And so this is true, but especially when you are dealing with a multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy requires providers are hosting multiple clients, right, and multiple tenants, and into one infrastructure, one hardware environment, and we're just creating multiple incidents of virtual machines. As an example, I am running just one virtual machine, and I am the only tenant in that virtual machine. But underlying hardware, underlying hypervisor, they're all being shared with another tenant. Right? So that tenant could be different industry, way different country, and so we don't know exactly who maybe the tenant could be in an apartment complex. So when you are sign up to our apartment complex, you are one of the tenants in an apartment complex, and then you walk in and move in, and then next door of the tenant maybe it's someone very malicious, right? So then they may be able to compromise a hypervisor. They may also compromise your virtual machines, and so hijack your virtual machine because you're just next door of his virtual machine. So all these are possibilities of cloud computing. So these are some of the security issues we have to provide. And how do we separate those security boundaries from one virtual machine to another virtual machine, and also one a tenant to another tenant, right? So let's talk about those, right? And then, so since you're hiring someone else to manage and host your applications, so your cloud environment is controlled by a third party, such as Amazon or Microsoft and other companies, which is a typical case, and especially the government agencies, they love Amazon, right? So that means how much security can they guarantee and how they're running it. So guaranteeing the security is one thing. For technology, people like us, we need to know how they're managing it, right? And then we also need to manage it at the same time. So it's a sharing responsibility. Security is not just only one person's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. So we have to manage it all at the same time, and they manage it, and we have to monitor what they monitor, and we have to manage it in our administrative consoles at the same time they do. So it's a check and balance and doing it at the same time. And giving all the access and privileges and not monitoring and auditing at all, and then I think you're giving an entire organization's assets to someone else, and you don't know how they're managed, and until something happens. So here's an example of what if something happens to the cloud computing infrastructure, and the customer loss of control for data applications and resources are located with the providers of infrastructure. So that means that you are actually hosting applications and other database and assets in the cloud providers, and so they have a total control of your asset, right? And then you are totally trusting their management and the performance of cloud computing, including identity management. So identity management has to do with identifying the users accessing the cloud computing, and also authorizing at the same time the resource that they're hosting at the same time. But you're the data owner. You are the responsible stakeholders of those customer database, and you can outsource those cloud computing, but you are not going to transfer the responsibility, right? And the responsibility of managing and securing the customer database is still with your responsibility. You can't really transfer the responsibility of the security to somebody else. Although they can manage it and they can actually be contracted to do your work, but you are still responsible. Okay? So then there's an access control of users. Users will need to access specific database in the cloud computing. At the same time, they need to also be able to access applications, and then get access to specific data structures, database tables and rows and columns. And those access controls should be controlled by your organization, or it could be controlled by the cloud providers. And that's something you need to negotiate, but most of the time, it is something you need to manage it, right? Because the cloud providers, they will do a good job providing infrastructure. They will do a good job providing the platform, but they're not going to do a good job of listening to your customers' requests, and they're not going to do a good job of customizing your application, right? So typically, for anything below hypervisor, the providers can do a wonderful job providing the infrastructure. Anything above hypervisor, you should be managing it, right? And that's directly accessing customer interface and customer applications. So anything above hypervisor, that's something you need to really manage it, and then also monitor user access and customer configurations. Okay, so that's how you need to kind of have security boundaries and where you want to share the responsibilities. And then customer also relies on your providers contracts, make sure they can really protect data security and privacy, right? And that's easy to say than actually performing how to secure data security and how to secure data privacy. Well, providers can only do what you're asking them to do and how much you pay them to do, right? And so unless you have a signed contract, they are not going to do additional work, extra work, because it's not their responsibility, right? And so you need to really have them responsible to do specific protection and security because data resides in their infrastructure and also in their database, right? And especially think about this, you are hosting your customer database and customer credit card because you're running the application that collects credit card information, and that database is on their provider's infrastructure on disk. So how to protect the data at rest? So when customers accessing application, they will also access their own specific database and data records, which stays in the provider's infrastructure on disk. And so how do you protect the data at rest? Because that is on disk. Well, you can also say, oh, we're going to encrypt that. We're going to encrypt the disk. Right? Then how to manage the keys for all these different tenants, different customers. And the key management comes very nightmare if we don't control the key management for encryptions. Then you can rely on the providers and have them to manage the key management. Well, if they manage the key of the encryption, then you're giving away the key, house key, to your home. So that's another thing you need to really manage. How do we really protect the data at rest if we apply encryption? And then who's going to manage the keys for encryption keys? So those are something you need to really have a clear line of responsibilities with the providers and who's going to manage it. So many things you also have to manage it as a business owner rather than cloud providers. And then there are something you can rely on the cloud providers such as infrastructure and the platforms, and then data communications. That's something they need to provide it. But anything above hypervisor and also security monitoring is something you really should do as a business owner. Okay, especially when you're hiring the cloud providers. So, and also continuous monitoring. You got to really monitor user activities, and you also monitor providers' performance. Right? You need to really monitor the provider, what they do, and how they're managing your cloud environment. And so you got to really speak up if they are not really performing to your standards, and if they are not complying with your requirements. So you need to really speak up because the bottom line is you are still responsible as owner of your customers, owner of your business asset, owner of your operation, and not the providers. Providers only give you what you're asking and how much you pay them to do the work. So this is where you draw the line of a security, where the data security and privacy protection, who's going to do it and how we're going to do it together. We are in this together, right? It's a shared responsibility. So, and there's a multi-tenancy, right? We talked about this, and multi-tenancy is we got multiple tenants in an apartment, and we're going to share the same physical infrastructure, such as the disk space, such as CPU and the memory utilization. So we're going to actually share this. Then we're going to have some separations of security at the same time. Okay, so that's something providers will provide that security separation from one tenant to another. And so, as an example, from one virtual machine to another virtual machine, there is going to be some separation of security with a firewall. The firewall is going to be a virtualized firewall. It is a logical firewall. It's not actual physical firewall. And then also, we're going to have a firewall between hypervisor and anything above of virtual machines, and so that we can control with the access control. So all those need to be signed up as a contract with the providers, because you can't really do that as owner of your data owner, because it's managed by cloud providers. So cloud provider needs to control all those services once you sign up the contract of security. Then, since everything is in the cloud providers infrastructure at data center, how much can you trust them? Because they pretty much own the infrastructure. And what if they turn into insider threat? And you trust them, and they become insider threat, and they could also install a malicious software. They could also compromise your customer database. and they may also committed to a data breach on your customers' records and credit cards and others. And so this is where you need to monitor their activities. You need to also sign up the contract of security at the same time to protect your customer database. And you also need to monitor on a daily basis how well they're performing. And otherwise, if they're not performing well, then your cloud providers, and we are willing to switch to another cloud providers. If it's not Amazon, maybe we need to hire somebody, a Microsoft or somebody else, right? Ends up the threat inside the threat is the most damaging because they already have access to your hardware and software. They already have administrative permission settings. Then what about outsider threats? Outsider threats, anybody coming from outsiders, from the internet, and how much are we protecting our assets and customer database from those outsider threats? We have a strong perimeter protection. We have a defense in depth from outsiders, so we can screen those users and against adversaries. And how do we screen those? And do we have a defense in depth in access control? Do we have multiple layers to protect ideas, those attacks coming in with IDS and IPS, firewall implementation, access control, and so only authorized users get access to our internal database, right? But this is all inside of cloud providers' facility. Okay, so how much can we trust? How much can we ask them to do the work? Oh, they're not going to do anything until you start pulling your credit card, and then you tell them, I am asking this, and I'm willing to pay the price, right? So, it is a very delicate balance of security. Security is not cheap, and so you need to really have a very clear definition of who's going to do what responsibility and how much it's going to cost in early stage, and before you sign, before you're committing to the cloud providers. Okay, and so there are an adversity out there, malicious people out there, insiders and outsiders. Insiders at the client, they can also do password cracking, authenticate and compromise. They can gain the virtual machines compromised because they have access to it. And so then also the cloud providers we just talked about, since they own the infrastructure, they can turn into insider threat. Right, so they can also compromise the entire infrastructure because infrastructure is managed by their organization. Okay, so cloud providers, so they can also be able to read unencrypted data. So if we don't apply encryption, they can always read it because the data moves in and out of their infrastructure. They can also capture the data and be able to read it. So if we encrypt the data at rest, encrypt the data in motion, and then I think we have a better security, right? And so we also need to manage a key management for encryptions. So these are all possibilities, right? And since they are actually managing virtual machines, they can access virtual machines and break our confidentiality. And they can also copy of the virtual machines. I mean, remember, virtual machines are software, right? So they can make a copy. They can run that incident on another platform, and they can migrate into another platform and just run it just like we're running in our cloud. So they can make a clone. They can make another one, and they can also monitor network communications and application patterns, and they will be able to learn how well we do. So they have they have access to entire intellectual properties of our assets, because they have access to it. So the cloud providers have total control over our operation. So there comes how we can allow them to do it, or we don't want them to access our asset at all. And so we need to really draw the line how much they can access our infrastructure, how much they can access and manage our application data and our corporate intellectual properties. So that's how you sign up the contract, right? So you sign up contract before you commit to cloud providers, how much they can access our infrastructure, how much they can manage it, right? So that's important for our infrastructure before we sign up the contract with those people, okay? So That's important. So here are some of the attackers from outsiders. They can listen to the network traffic, and they can also insert malicious software, and they can also learn our cloud environments by listening. And so they can also attack a DDoS attack, right? DDoS attack is denial service attack because they have access to our corporate environment. So all those are possibilities. Okay, and and they do have some challenges because once we are hosting our cloud computing outside our cloud providers, and they have to go through security controls, right? And so that means that they need to be able to access our cloud providers of physical machines, hardware, and they also need to be able to access our virtual machines. So if they want to actually hijack up our virtual machines, and they also need to collect some of the data. So it just doesn't happen, because it's not wide open. So our cloud providers typically have a layers of protection. So they will do best what they can with their limited resource, and so attackers need to do some work in the first place before they attack the cloud environment. So here are some examples of some of the threats, and it is just not a comprehensive listing. It is just a small list of threats that they could actually go after. Here is a identity spoofing. It is actually acting as someone else, but the person is not the person actually pretend to be. Tampering with the data. Once they access our environments, in the cloud environments, they can actually get access to data and compromise database and compromise private data. And also they can also do repudiation. That means they can use, they can steal our public and private keys, and they can also deny access to actually pretending to be someone else, and they use those keys and sign digital certificates and sign digital signatures. Those are some of the things that they could also do in addition to accessing our data. And there's the most important aspect is information disclosure. They will break our confidentiality and then access our corporate data in the cloud environment. So that could be most devastating for loss of intellectual properties. Then for DDoS attack, which is a denial of service attack, this can be some combination of a ping of death, and they can also shut down some of the services on the web interface. They can also shut down some of the information on the virtual machines. And so any combination of those can create this DDoS attack. Once they have access to some of the resources in our cloud environment, they can also elevate the privileges. So they become part of an administrator of managing virtual machines and also applications. And so they can start managing the applications and virtual machines for some time, for a long time. So those people who have access to an administrator permission setting, they can monitor the traffic, and they can also learn our behaviors of our customers. And they can start collecting information of our customers, such as credit cards, such as privacy issues, private data. Then they can abuse those information at a later time. So that could be most devastating once they have administrative privileges in our virtual machines. So all those are a possibility of the threats, whether they're internal or they're external. Okay. Okay. So how do we really secure the data, right? And then how do we really secure the software, the code in the cloud environment? Well, it depends on who has access and how much security controls we have put in place in the cloud environment, and also where are the security layers. And so, how much security layers we have put in outside perimeters, and how much security layers we have put in the cloud of our platform, and also in application layers. And so that is, it depends on how many layers we have security controls, and then where do we keep our data at, right? And then do we have encryption on those data, and then how do we really manage those encryption keys? So let's talk about those security issues, right, in a virtualized environment. So here's incident isolation. So that means we're actually sharing the same physical machines, and and we need to isolate those virtual machines. So we're running from one tenant to others, right? And so each tenant, so they're renting each virtual machines, and we need to have a separation of security. That means we're going to have not only a firewall in between all virtual machines, we have to have some ACL, and we need to have some monitoring tools, such as SIEMs tool, and so we're gonna have a clear isolation from one virtual machine to another virtual machine. So if they break, it's called a virtual machine hijacking. If they break into another virtual machine from one tenant to another, then they can do for all the virtual machines. Then that means they can compromise every tenants of virtual machines, because they have ability to compromise hijack virtual machines. So they may not go through hypervisor. They may go through virtual machine to form the virtual machines, hijack each other's. And if they go through hypervisor, if the hypervisor is ever compromised, and we have really bad infrastructure, and that means our security is pretty much given up, giving free tickets to entire infrastructure of every virtual machines, because the hypervisor manages all virtual machines. Okay, and so they have access, input and output of data flow to each virtual machine from the hypervisor. So if the hypervisor is ever compromised, then we're going to have to shut down the entire cloud computing as soon as possible, right? And but there is possibility. There's possibility because the hypervisor is being controlled by there's one hypervisor for all those number of virtual machines. And so it's being accessed from individual user accounts coming in from outsiders or insiders, right? And so hopefully we separate. So you look at this stacks of cloud computing. So you have on the top running applications in a virtual machine. Then you have a hypervisor separating virtual machines from hardware resource. And then you have a network connection. Right? So network connection is actually interfacing with the network interface card, and hopefully you separate the physical separation from the network side, and you also have a logical separation to virtual machines applications. So you can visualize how people come in to those virtual machine applications from outsiders, and how you're screening their authentications. Okay, and so you need to really be able to tell what are those virtual machines can make sure they check the user identity and authentication properly, and give a proper authorization to specific user access control. So they're all being screened from each layers and each infrastructure of the virtual machines. If you can visualize those multiple layers of screening process, and you have a better security, right? And so, but here is incident isolation is each virtual machine must be separated, and do not give a root permission, do not give an administrator permission to anyone other than you or the cloud providers, but somebody you can trust, right? And so hopefully no one compromised as an internal threat. So you need to really streamline the security boundaries so that you can identify specific assets of your cloud computing. Where is the database access? Where is our hardware? And also virtualized machines. So these are all considered as assets. How do you protect them, right? And protect it from whom? From a malicious tenant or from insider threat like cloud providers. Okay. So then you need to make a list of all those threats. Who are those considered as a threat? Natural threat is one of the threats we need to worry about, but that's probably one of the last threats you have to worry about, because if we hire a cloud providers, they pretty much know exactly where they need to stand up their cloud computing. So they were located a location where we don't have a history of natural disasters, right? So we're not going to stand up cloud computing in hurricane season in Florida, and we don't want to have on the cloud computing someplace we have earthquake. All those are something they already have considered. So the natural disaster is probably one of the last one you have to worry about. But you do need to worry about those in the case of there's disaster. Disaster could be terrorism. Disaster could be fire. This could be a natural disaster also. So all those are considered as natural disasters, and you need to really prepare those, right? One way to prepare is to buy an insurance, right? Buying insurance is one way to cover that threat. So you need to identify all those threats that may occur in the cloud computing, and you come up with a how to really create a safeguard and protect those assets in the cloud against those sort of threats. So this is something you really need to pay attention, right? And so, where is customer data most sensitive information that we need to protect, and how do we protect their confidential integrity and availability, right? Then also another important aspect is if customers do not see or not being able to run the applications in the cloud environment, they will notice it right away and they will complain, right? So this is the most essential aspect is make sure we deliver what we promised of those applications in the cloud so they can run their job, they can run their applications, getting access to their specific database. So make sure we keep all those assets and make sure we provide confidential integrity and availabilities, right? And so without any integrity issues, without any computing device problems in the virtual machines, so all those are something identifying assets and identifying threats and come up with a security controls in your cloud environment. So that's your responsibility as cloud owner. So it's a shared responsibility. Even if you hire a cloud providers, the cloud providers, they will only do what you're asking them to do, right? And they can only do so much. So it's your responsibility overall to spread it out exactly how to protect and what to protect, and then you have to monitor, right? And so, but there are some consequences out there. So if there are active failures of security protection from the cloud environment, and so how would you make the cloud providers liable for their failure? Or better yet, how do you prevent them before something happens? And one way to do is you need to monitor, and you need to also do audit. So unless you do continuous monitoring, continuous audit of the cloud environment where you're hosting your cloud applications, you may not know exactly how they're performing and how they're doing at the cloud provider facility. So that's something is a shared responsibility we all need to do. Not only we have to do as owner of data and business owner, and the cloud provider, they also have to do it, right? It's a joint responsibilities. And then we also talked about there are some attacks by other tenants, other customers that can happen, and so you just happen to host somebody very technical savvy customers, who may be from other country, who may be from could be hired hackers. So you can never tell those customers who may be moving into your next door as a tenant in your virtual machines. So those are some of the things that you need to be able to identify the threat vectors. Okay, and then also need to understand the legal boundaries and the secure regulatory issues. So what if data moves from one country to another? So there are some issues with the privacy, and there are some issues with the national security, and there are some issues with the other health record information being released, other issues. So all these are important. Depends on the data sensitivity, depends on the customers you're providing services, and so you need to really sign up the contracts, the SLAs with the providers so that they know what to do and they know how to make sure that nothing happens bad to your customers. Then there's a perimeter security, right? Remember, the perimeter security is anything interfacing the internet connection, because the internet is considered as unsafe and is pretty insecure. So anything interfacing the internet is considered as perimeter protection. So how do we protect the perimeter protection? Well, if a cloud provider, if the perimeter protection is not secure, then that's that's something you need to really sit down with the cloud providers, and they need to have a better defense in depth at the parameters, such as they need to have defense in depth of firewall, IDS and IPS, and perhaps SIEMs tools, monitoring, continuous monitoring, logging, and alerting. All those are capabilities. That's something they need to have. If they are not, if they are broken, then it will be down to your customer database. Their adversary will access. So then integrate providers and customer security systems together. Make sure we are all monitoring for the sake of protecting customer database, right? And so, what if there is actual, provider security failures, and we need to really explain to them, and also make sure they come up with a security control, and then reevaluate SLA, service level agreements, so that they are standing up better security, and otherwise they have to pay penalties. And things we have to really pay attention is identify the number of threats that you are concerned with most, and such as provider resource that's being shared with untrusted parties if they are actually sharing their resources with untrusted parties. If they do that, because they can do that because they want to make more profit with a limited resource of hardware. So that's how they want to host multiple tenants, multi-tenancy, so that they can collect more money from everybody, sharing the same resource. So since we are sharing the same resource, there are possibility of a database being compromised, the database being shared with other parties, right? And so that means we are sharing same disk space. Many organizations, by the way, cloud providers, they do not apply encryption, right? And so they refuse to apply encryptions because key management becomes very complex. And they are most of organizations that we spoke, and they do not encrypt their disk space. And also they are hosting multi-tenancy. That means they have multiple customers. They're all store their sensitive data on one disk, and it's not encrypted, right? And so that means if the disk is compromised, and then all the data, privacy data, and credit cards, and all sensitive information can be broken, and the confidentiality can be broken, and not only integrity and availability can be compromised. So all those are issues of a current environment today. All right, and so that's something you need to really stress with the cloud providers. Now, managing a government federal cloud environment, so they are really most concerned about security. So what our federal clients do is they do not want to share any of the resources. They don't believe in a public cloud. They only go with a private cloud, right? And if they really short with the money, they may go with a community cloud. Community cloud is I'm okay with sharing the resource of hardware, a disk, and the CPU and memory with another government agency, so that our infrastructure is only for the government agencies. That's considered as a community cloud. So federal agencies, they're okay with that. But other organizations like CIA, as an example, CIA cloud is being hosted at Amazon, and it is all private. It's a private cloud, and at the same time, the private cloud is not in a cloud provider facility. It is at the CIA facility. So this is how we are approaching the cloud environment today. We like to trust the cloud provider, and because they want to do a wonderful job, so that's how they make a profit. But we need to work together so that let's not take any chance. Resourcing the cloud environment and putting our sensitive data in outside of our environment. So we want to keep our private cloud in-house. So that means we can hire Amazon, right? We can hire Amazon, so they do what they do well. They can build a private cloud on our on-prem. That means that in our infrastructure, they're going to stand up our cloud environment but it's going to be a private cloud. So we're the only one accessing it, and that cloud environment is only for our organization. So this is how we do it, and for private cloud, and we are not outsourcing the entire infrastructure, right? And so they are Amazon is coming to our infrastructure. They are building a private cloud. So that's how CIA does it. That's how many of the government agencies do. So being hosting private cloud in my infrastructure, I feel more comfortable because the data stays in my data center, and I can see my data is not going anywhere, right? And it's being accessed by our own users and our own employees. So this is how I feel about the private cloud. But then again, there are other organizations out there who are we are really short with the money, and so we like to reduce the cost of maintenance, reduce the cost of operating cloud computing, and so we're going to outsource it and go with the cheapest way of cloud computing is, well, we're going to host our data in a public cloud. And public cloud is someplace out there in a cheap location, and we're going to share all the resources with somebody else. And so we're going to share just all the resources. We're going to be just one tenant having one virtual machine in a public cloud. That means our data is shared in one disk and being shared by everybody else. And there's no encryption applied, and the data connection is still shared with everybody else. So there's no separation of security at all because we're all same pool of resource, and we're sharing the information. We're just using the resource at the same time other people are using the resource. So this is how we save money, right? This is how we save money. But this is not how we protect our security. So security is not cheap, right? Security is expensive, right? And so you get what you pay for, right? So if we are start sharing same disk, if we are start sharing the same CPU and memory, and there could be some compromised data breach, and there was also a breach of security from one virtual machine to another. So that is a common security breaches out there today. So here are some examples of security we need to really protect of hypervisor, and we need to really separate it from from virtual machines. We need to separate it from hardware. Make sure there's a clear separation of from one tenant to another, one virtual machine to another, getting access to hypervisor. Because hypervisor is a common denominator for all the virtual machines, right? And then what is physical security? And we talked about all the virtual and logical security up to this point, but we need to talk about where is a physical separation from one tenant to another tenant. So if I'm accessing my virtual machine, I'm coming from web browsers and then get access to my application. That is all my customers do. But what if we have a separate channel, separate network connection using a VLAN? And then I have all my customers coming into one VLAN separations. All the traffic is encrypted. Hopefully we have IPsec enabled, so data is encrypted and with a secure channel to my virtual machine. So all my customers and my users, administrator included, they all are accessing my virtual machines with a separate virtual machine, separate VLAN. And everybody else, they use a different VLAN. So other customers, they use a VLAN number 2, and then so the customers, they use another VLAN number 2. So we're separating security with physical separations with VLAN number 1, VLAN number 2. So we're separating customers with a multiple VLAN. So, and that is one way to separate physical separations. And we talked about virtual separation of virtual machines. We need to have firewall in between, and we have strong access control from hypervisor up and virtual machines and down. So that the individual hypervisor has only and controls one virtual machine at a time. So it's a very important aspect of those, right? And then there's application separation. So application separation is, I think a lot of people do well because it is in the virtual machines. It's more about software, and they can control with types of access control and who's accessing those applications and so on. So those are important aspects, right? Okay, so let me see who is typing in any questions here. There's I don't see any questions up to this far. Okay, so I think we're very close to the end of time. So I have about 1 minute, and so I'm going to open the floor to everybody. we have about 150 attendees. So any questions up to this far? So we got about 1 minute. So I want to answer some of the questions that you have. So if you do, please type in your chat line so I can read your questions in the chat block in your conference call. Okay, please type your questions in the chat or questions box. I'm just monitoring those. All right.
Hi.
So,
Hi, I see one.
I'm sorry?
Hello, you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we have one question, for example, is Google is a cloud provider? Am I right? Is Google considered a cloud provider?
Yes, Google is a cloud provider also.
Okay. And then also, Marcelo asks, how can we perform cloud services security audit equivalent to those we perform on premises, traditionally environment today?
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, how do we protect our cloud environment, and that is comparable to like a traditional data center infrastructure? Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's what we're discussing all in entire seminars. Is one way to do is just like a data center, because data center now they could outsource a data center. A lot of people do. Now you can also own the data center. I'm going to make up my data center a private, and this is only for my organization, and no one else is going to use it. I'm not sharing any of the resources. Then connection to my data center is only for my employees. They're going to do that with a secure connection, with a virtual connection, VLAN connection, with a multiple factor authentication with RSA token. So it's separating that asset. So no, you're not sharing with any of the resources. So make it private data center, private cloud. So if you can make it a private cloud and at the same time host that cloud, a private cloud in your data center, so no one can access your hardware, no one can access your logical connection application, then you are fairly secure as far as protecting your cloud infrastructure. And as an example, government agencies, they are happy with the private cloud being hosted in their infrastructure, like CIA. But that cloud can be built by somebody like Amazon, right? But as long as it is hosted in your environment, right? So that's all about making close in your environment, not sharing the resource. So that becomes a private cloud. If you do private cloud, and I think you're doing a wonderful job, you're pretty safe. Okay.
Great. So we have one person, David, asked about slide 20.
Uh-huh.
What is a VMM, or is this a typo? VM.
That's virtual machine management.
Okay, great. Because we see all popular VMM.
Yeah, that's management. Virtual machine management. Monitor, virtual machine monitor.
Okay, great. Also, let's see. What about CSA Cloud Control Matrix certification? When is this recommended?
Well, what is recommended? Well, if you have CSA's cloud certification, that would be wonderful. And but that is a good way to start. But cloud knowledge and the cloud skill set. And so any certification, they will test you. They will make sure you have good foundation of principle of the cloud knowledge. And so anybody who studied some, and then you can pass it. And so, but they will get you somewhere to do cloud work, and such as managing cloud environments, administering the cloud infrastructure. That would be a good start, and have that certification.
Okay. One person, Rohit, asked, what are the key research areas in cloud security? Areas of research combining big data analytics and cloud?
Oh, that's cool. That's a cool question. Okay. Yeah, remember, when those security threats come in, we are only talking about outside threat coming in, right? And now internal threat is going to be there if it happens, right? And sometimes it's tough because they already have access to our internal resource. And but most of attacks coming in from outsiders, but there's going to be a lot. There's going to be quite a bit, right? And most of them are screened and protected because we have defense in depth. We have security controls such as firewall, IDS, and IPS. Now, the real question is, how do we really screen and how do we really recognize that this is the threat? Well, one way to do it is analytics, right? And so analytics is getting smart of all those traffic coming in, and then have a built-in intellectual properties, and then you build the statistics, and you build the knowledge base. And so then at the same time, you also tap into other resources outside internet resource, and then understand exactly what is happening outside in the cyberspace, and then be able to recognize, oh, there is a rise of surge of virus, and surge of worms, surge of cyber attacks, surge of credit card breach, surge of something cyber terrorism, surge of cyber warfare, surge of weaponizing with a virus attacks. There's surge of ransomware. You need to be able to tap into those cyber activity taking place, and then integrate those information into your analytics database, and then be able to be proactively protect your environment. So if you do that, and you're doing a wonderful job. And a lot of people, this is what people are thinking. What people are thinking, well, when there's an attack and we open up incidents, right? Then we open up the ticket or help desk ticket, right? And that's always a reactive posture. So we are reacting to a security incident that's always late. How can we be proactive and be ahead of those adversaries, and or at on the same page with the adversary hackers? So if you can be ahead of hackers, just to be on the same page, right? So the only way you can do that is build the analytics and understand what is out there in the cyberspace. So really understand entire picture of horizon. I think that's a great question. I think this is where we are really moving into in today's cyberspace to protect our network. Good question.
Great. So we have another one. Do you suggest all standards should be implemented according to NIST recommendations?
Yeah, but NIST recommendation, you can't go wrong with the NIST recommendations. However, it's not for everybody, okay? And so what you have to do is, best thing you can do is you can follow NIST standard, but you have to tailor. You have to make sure you can customize it to fit into your environment. Because your environment is very unique to your customer. Your environment is very unique to your stakeholder. Your environment is very unique to your application. So it's not really matching the NIST standard. NIST standard is for everybody, right? But it's not really addressing your problem. So you need to really make sure you can tailor that NIST standard into your environment. Make sure that works really well for you. But you just can't say, well, here is one template. I can just drop it into my environment and hopefully it works. Now, so you need to really tailor it into your environment. Okay, so NIST standard is a great idea. You go with that, but you need to really tailor it into your environment to fit into your infrastructure, because every organization is unique. What works for one organization may not work for your organization, because every organization has different challenges, different people, different network, and different interface, and they're all different. So don't work migrating security from one organization to another. Okay, good question. Next.
If possible, is it possible to have some control in the cloud for the client, control for the customer? I'm a little confused by the wording. But.
Okay, if I hear correctly, that do we want to allow the client control security? And it's because I think that's because there's some they can access some of the interface, they can access and run an application. Well, the real answer is you're going to assume the client just like end users. End users they can make a mistake, right? And that's why we call them end users. End users are allowed to make a mistake if you let them do. Okay, so don't give them any room, don't give them any control. Don't give them any administrative privileges. Don't give them access, if they don't need to. And so, so we have to treat like a little babies, and because if we give them room and in a risk area, and they can jump in and they create a problem. So we have to have a safe area of the working environment for the end users, so they can do their productive work. So they don't have to worry about security. So end users need to do productive work to get the job done. They should not think about security. Well, they should think about security, so, but it's not going to be reliable. And don't assume end users will do security work for their application and their environment. Okay, good question. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm going through it. 1 second. We might have a few more. The matrix there, we talked about that. Someone had mentioned something about textual criticism and solving over-restrained matrices. I think that might have been in relation to your CSA cloud control matrix certification.
Yes. Okay, so that could be, those are actually security matrices. I think we need to, well, any security matrices and the requirements, that's something we need to pay attention to. Make sure we understand and how to apply and how to really, make sure we're securing every matrices, comply with those matrices. So understanding those matrices is a good, always a good idea, so that we can incorporate those into the real environment. And the question is, how do we really translate that matrices into a real application, a real environment into our network? So that's, I think, where you need to really build up the skill set and also the knowledge by studying and by experience.
Also, we have one last one. This one is for any suggestions that you might have for the audience for text to further look into. Are there anything? Is there any text that they can sort of find online or otherwise that might help them with the same subject of cloud security?
Oh, well, there are many textbooks out there, especially about cloud security. It's a topic people talk about today, every single day. And so I can't really recommend one textbook or another because I have association with publishers. And so I recommend just Google it, and then whatever it hits first, I think that's what you want to pay attention to. However, my recommendation would be, better yet, would be just go to NIST standard. NIST standard has many publications of cloud security, and I recommend you start reading the NIST publication of cloud security first, what they recommend first, how to protect your environment. And then once you have those the documentation and the NIST publication, then you can search for textbook. Textbooks can be very tedious, and it may not be very pleasing to read. But this publication may be a lot easier to read, and because they are shorter, and they will get to the bottom and also address real problems. Okay. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, good luck, everybody, and thanks for attending. And so this has been a great seminar. Any questions? You can relate to my email or a hosting member, and then hopefully everybody do well in security. So good luck, everybody.
Thank you. I'm ending it now. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Thanks.